Forward to the cloud. Okay, we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. Good afternoon. My name is Michael Dowry, and I have the pleasure of serving as receiver for the city of Chester. Today is Tuesday, August 13th, 2024, and we are gathered for the Municipal Financial Recovery Advisory Committee meeting. As typically, we are joined by, on behalf of the Governor's Office, Mr. Andrew Sheaf, on behalf of Delaware County Council, Ms. Kelly Diaz, and on behalf of the City of Chester, Councilman Shaquan Davis. At this time, Mayor Roots has not joined us yet, but we hope that he will be able to soon. And as always, joined on this engagement by Mr. Kapoor, serving as Chief of Staff, and Mr. Cody Dale, Executive on Loan from DCED. Good afternoon, all.
Good afternoon.
Good.
All right, well, let's jump right in. I think our first agenda item, we just want to confirm that everyone did receive a summary of our last meeting. I want to thank Mr. Kapoor for running point, as I was having some technical difficulties there, but thank you for conducting a good meeting.
Mr. Receiver, if I can just stop for one moment, I got a notification that the connection may have timed out on the Facebook. Cody, could you just check and make sure the Facebook Live is still going on? I apologize.
Yes, no problem. From my screen, it does still say we're live, and it looks like it is working correctly.
Okay, fantastic. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt, Mr. Receiver.
No worries. Thank you for that. Well, let's jump now to public comment. Mr. Dale, have we received any public comments since our last meeting?
Again, we haven't received any comments from the public, so I would just like to encourage everyone watching and watching the recording, whether it's live or recorded, to please reach out to us. The best way to do so is through the email address info@chesterreceivership.com.
Thank you, Mr. Dill. And I want to highlight some recent updates to our website there, so hopefully it's a little more user-friendly at chesterreceivership.com. We'll move forward with general updates. Mr. Kapoor, did you want to provide any general updates before we get into today's presentation?
No, Mr. Receiver, I think we'll have enough in the presentation today, and we can talk about both what will be happening in this presentation as well as at the next MFRAC meeting.
Very well. And before we get into today's presentation, just open it up to the full committee for any questions, comments, or concerns.
I do have a quick question. I'm sorry. So I do have a quick question. This might be covered later after the presentation, but one thing that I wanted to address is the city of Chester had a budget committee meeting as of yesterday, as well as myself and other members of council and the mayor, to my knowledge, had a conversation with our CFO. And I was hoping, Mr. Receiver, if you or Mr. Kapoor could shed some insight, or if you have any, on the new budget situation that's happening in the city of Chester. I know that we're working on editing and maybe making some changes to the current budget that was passed December 23rd, I believe, of 2023. And I just wanted to see from a transparency perspective how involved you all have been with the proposal, I guess, of the new budget, and how that, is going to affect the city of Chester financially going forward.
Okay, so a couple of pieces there. I think the recent meeting you were referring to was in anticipation of the 2025 budget preparation process?
Yes.
So, anxious to see under Richard Troutman's leadership, the city CFO, how that process will unfold, and really taking ownership of that moving forward. With the 2024 budget, my team kind of took a step back, I should say, and allowed the city CFO to move forward there. So Jim Lathrop really led the 2024 budget development process, and Richard Troutman will follow suit with 2025. And we'll continue to provide whatever assistance we can. To the second part of your question or statement there, regarding the 2024 budget and the proposed budget amendment that should be going before council, if not tomorrow, then hopefully by the next meeting. As we work through the first 6 months of 2024, we identified a number of issues with the 24 budget that required updates to the city chart of accounts. I'm sorry, is everyone able to hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right, so required some updates to the city's chart of accounts, some adjustments to the city's org chart, and combination of 24 budget and practice and just needing to make some adjustments on the fly. But then also just some omissions, some mistakes that weren't uncovered in the 24 budget adoption process. So the amendment that's coming before council here soon is a combination of both. Mistakes in line items, and then also some personnel adjustments that we would like to see happen. So how involved have we been? We've been heavily involved in reviewing the budget, helping the city to get to a point of producing budget versus actual reports. Happy to report that Richard Troutman just shared with us, I believe yesterday or the day, yeah, it had to be yesterday, that the city just recently completed its second monthly close process and was able to reconcile all accounts. So we're excited for the transition that's happening, but as we continue to refine and get better and better data, I shouldn't say but, or as we continue to refine and get better and better data, it enables us to go back and better refine the budget and our projections for years to come. So those are the annual budgets, and again, more of a city-led process, but I'm certainly involved with all of that. And then we get to the projections and quantifying the number, et cetera. And that's where BFM and my team really is taking the lead and ownership on multi-year projections and really trying to cost out city operations for years to come. So that part is all wrapped into the plan of adjustment and the federal bankruptcy process. So not yet ready to publicly discuss that work. Unfortunately, we can't with the mediations, but to the annual budgeting and the budget amendment that's coming before council, that part of it is being more so led by the city CFO, Richard Troutman.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Dowry, for that information. I greatly appreciate that, and it helped a lot. So thank you.
No problem. All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, let's move over to Mr. Kapoor in today's presentation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Receiver. Just wanted to make sure folks could see this. Could see my screen here.
Yes.
You can do that. Thanks, Ms. Diaz. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Vijay Kapoor. I serve as Chief of Staff to Receiver Dowry. As we indicated last week, we were going to use today to give you all give you and the public an operational update on what's going on in the city of Chester. There's a lot that's been happening over the past couple of years, and certainly we know from the citizens' point of view, their biggest concern here is what's happening to the city. What are the services that they're receiving, and we think that that's important. Every once in a while to take stock of where we are and talk about what's been happening. So the purpose of today's presentation was, to take you back literally almost a year ago. We made a MFRAC presentation where we explained what the receiver's bankruptcy approach was. And in that presentation, we sort of, I think really for the first time, defined success. And we spent a lot of time thinking about what success would mean. And we chose our words very carefully. And we defined it as ensuring that Chester can financially and operationally provide an adequate level of vital and necessary services on an ongoing basis in a manner that is in the best interests of its residents. And, we'll spend just a moment kind of going through what that means again, just to refresh people's memory before we get into kind of the specifics, because we want to relate back what those operations and what some of the operational improvements are relative to that definition of success. We are going to be spending our time today really talking about Chester operations, things involving the bankruptcy. We are going to save that for the next MFRAC, which will be in 2 weeks on August 27th. So let's just go back for a moment and go back and look at kind of what the receiver and his team and his directives have in mind when we're talking about what success is. If you go back to Act 47, which is the law that puts the city of Chester in receivership, the receiver is tasked with ensuring that residents receive vital and necessary services. Hopefully, by the end of receivership, everybody's going to know And everyone is going to remember the term vital and necessary services. But that is a statutory directive that the receiver has per Act 47. And years of personnel cuts, inefficient operations, outdated allocations of duties where nobody knows who really was in charge, resulted in Chester residents not receiving adequate service levels. And so from our view, we really view the role of the receiver and those of us who are on his team, that it's not just enough to balance the budget. Chester has to invest in its workforce. It's got to invest in its infrastructure in order to provide adequate services. So again, when we look at the definition of success, we take it broadly, but we also realize that it's important to parse out each of these areas. So the key components of the definition of success: first is financial and operational. It's an adequate level of vital and necessary service on an ongoing basis in a manner that is in the best interest of the residents. So, hopefully by this point, I think folks have kind of bought into this, but receivership and Chapter 9 bankruptcy are not just about balancing budgets. Our directive here, while we have to balance our budget, that's necessary, but it's not sufficient in our mind. It's also about ensuring that the city provides services to its residents, which is, again, the purpose of a city. That's why we have cities. That's why we have government. It's to provide services and to their residents. And so if you just balance the budget, you don't take into account service delivery. It just that makes little sense. That's really not that's not really successful, right? That what you're really doing there is just solving a math problem. And the city of Chester is not a math problem. It's part of the reason in improving operations why the receiver filed the plan modification that we did way back on November 8th of 2022. And those of you know, on January 29th, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court affirmed that receiver's plan modification. And a lot of the operational, I think, improvements and successes that we're going to talk about today and go through, I think helped stem from that decision, and also I think from clarity here for employees as well as residents in terms of kind of understanding chain of command, understanding responsibilities, and certainly from our perspective, and we think from the city's end as well, that things are operating more smoothly now. Again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. So, the next component we have here is an adequate level of vital and necessary services. So again, you don't just say we're providing, it's not enough just to say you're providing vital and necessary services. You got to talk a little bit about the quality of those services, right? You can't just say, hey, we've got a police department, or hey, we've got a public works department. We got to talk about the level of service that's being provided. And that requires investment. It's not cheap to run a city. It requires personnel. It requires compensation to pay those personnel, to recruit them, to retain them. And it also costs a lot of money to invest in city infrastructure. We're also clear here too, and this has been a big point of what I think everybody's tried to do, including the mayor and others, in requiring improved efficiency and management as well. So it's not just about pouring more money in, although that is important, but it's also making best use of the resources that the city has. And this concept of ensuring that a city can provide an adequate level of service, that's also recognized in bankruptcy, right? People normally think about bankruptcy as just kind of dealing with debts, and that is, a lot of the work that's done in a Chapter 11, but in a Chapter 9 bankruptcy, which deals with public entities, there is an understanding, and it's across the board, but it was also kind of really, the point was really made in Detroit about the need to provide sufficient levels, adequate levels of vital and necessary services. And if you can't, right, if you can't provide an adequate level of vital and necessary services, there's a term that was coined in Detroit that was referred to as service delivery insolvency. And probably the best way to describe it is comes from the judge in the bankruptcy case, Judge Stephen Rhodes, where in approving Detroit's plan of adjustment, he stated from the bench, quote, "A large number of people in Detroit are suffering hardship because of what we have antiseptically called service delivery insolvency. Detroit's inability to provide adequate municipal services runs deep and has for years. It is inhumane and intolerable and must be fixed." And, I think certainly from the receiver's end and from his team's end, we feel the same way about Chester. And that is part and parcel of why the city is in Chapter 9 bankruptcy, and avoiding or getting out of service delivery insolvency is a key component of what we're trying to do. And then finally, in terms of the definition of success, before we start to move into some of the more specific operational ends, is the final part of the definition, where we talk about doing so in a manner that is in the best interests of residents. We've talked a lot about this in previous MFRACs, but as most of you know, oftentimes financially struggling communities are going to take any money that they can get in order to kind of stay afloat. And that's generally because, as is in the case of Chester, that their tax base cannot support an adequate level of operations. It's true in Chester. Our real estate taxes and our earned income taxes, they don't pay for, they don't cover our operating expenses. We rely on monies from casinos, money from an incinerator. And so, from the receiver's perspective, as he has said earlier, he doesn't think that dependence on revenues from industries with negative impacts on residents' health is in the best interest of city residents, and is seeking to make a good faith effort to develop a plan that doesn't require financial dependence on those revenues. But there's also the reality here that if you can't just eliminate dependence on those revenues immediately, we would have an enormous hole in the city budget if those revenues went away tomorrow. A significant, at least a $15 million hole in the budget, and on a budget of around $60-some million, that is enormous. But again, that's not going to stop us from working in good faith to try and develop a plan that does not require financial dependence on those revenues. And so now I want to take us into city operations, and I want to go through some of the various areas and update you on both some progress as well as some areas that are still in progress that city employees, the receivers team, elected officials, the public, outside vendors are all working towards. And before I get into that, I just want to express thanks to the city employees, to the 3 labor unions that the city has, to the retirees, former city retirees who have served the city. Those of us who have worked in distressed communities, and I include myself as one of them, Chester has been by far the most meaningful and the most challenging city that I've certainly ever worked in. And it has a lot to do with the financial constraints. It has a lot to do with the needs of the city. It has a lot to do with the history of the city, things. And I've worked with a lot of cities that are in good financial shape as well. Things are harder in Chester. They just are. Providing the same types of services in Chester is more difficult than in other communities, and there's various reasons for that, but it's true. And so, as we go through some of these improvements in city operations, some members of the public may be like, well, we would sort of expect you to be able to do that. And we expect ourselves to be able to do it. I know city employees do the same, but I also don't want to underestimate how difficult it is sometimes to provide certain basic levels of services in Chester as compared to other municipalities. And I do want to recognize the employees and the retirees and the residents, right, who have had to try and find a way to make do with the situation. So let's start with kind of high level. Let's talk a little bit about internal city operations, and then we're going to drill down to some of the various areas in in certain departments. But as a result of the Pennsylvania Supreme Court decision, really at the end of January of this year, we finally have an operational structure that's clear, that all employees are reporting through to what we're referring to as the city administrator. In Chester, it's called the chief of staff. This is basically like the city manager. And that's helpful because prior to having this clarity, it was not always clear who was responsible for what. It was not always clear, and that made it very difficult to hold people accountable. And that's not to say people are looking to punish others, but everybody needs to know what their role is, and everybody needs to know that what their responsibilities are. And I think finally, as a result of this decision, we've got clarity around. So there's a clear chain of command within the city. I think employees understand that. I think residents also hopefully are beginning to understand that. But in addition to kind of establishing that chain of command, what it's also helped us do is it's also allowed us to recruit qualified professional leaders for its various departments. Prior to that decision, we had a lot of difficulty recruiting people, both for the city administrator role as well as for department heads role, because it was always unclear what authority those individuals had. And it was very hard to try and explain the system that Chester had to prospective employees. Most people would have said, you know, I like the opportunity. I'm very interested in helping the city, but I don't understand the structure. And it's not clear to me that I'll be able to get the job done that you'd be hiring me to do. So again, as a result of that the Supreme Court decision, we've got some clarity there. And so I just want to show you on this slide, on slide 12, the city has now been able to fill key leadership positions with qualified professionals, people who have backgrounds in these various areas. And we are, as some of you may know, in the process of recruiting for a permanent city administrator. Our former chief, Leonard Leitner, is now the municipal administrator with Norristown. We wish him well. We hope he's doing well. We are grateful for our fire commissioner, JP Shirley, who is been serving as effectively our acting city administrator, and been doing a great job in that role, keeping things moving. We have a new chief financial officer, Richard Troutman. Rich came to us from the city of Coatesville. We have Gerald Mack, who's the human resources director, Commissioner Gretzky, who's the police commissioner, Christopher McGreen, who's serving as the deputy fire commissioner, really kind of dealing with a lot of the day-to-day issues in the fire department, while Commissioner Shirley is serving as the acting city administrator. We have a new public works director, Andrew Heyman, who was a former borough manager and is now has jumped in with both feet in the public works area. Sean Drawn, who will be the street supervisor in public works. Mark Alexander, a familiar name for many of you, who is the Parks and Recreation Director. Gamil Hall, who is the new Community and Economic Development Director. Paul Fritz, who's the new Planning Director. And Judy Richards, who's the new Deputy Director of Inspections. A lot of these folks have really come in, a lot of the new names here have come in within the last 1, 2, 3 months. And, you know, we're really pleased to welcome them to Chester with their, the experience that they have. And a lot of them are leading some pretty important initiatives, things that frankly, the city of Chester should have had in the past. They hadn't. And they're really building a lot of the processes and a lot of some of the basic operational structures really from the ground up. And, we welcome them here. We're excited about that. And I think part of the reason, not taking away from Commissioner Shirley here, that things have been running relatively smoothly is because we have these capable individuals in these roles, and that makes things run more smoothly. We're not saying we're 100% there on everything. I think all of us will acknowledge that. I think every one of these employees would feel the same way. But we feel like we've got the right team here, and we're very excited to start to see them move forward in their various areas. One other thing I just want to note here, and again, this is one of those things that many of you in the public may say, well, we would expect you to do that. But it hadn't been happening, until a couple of years ago. And that is that among those departments, there's been the establishment of weekly interdepartment meetings to improve communications between city departments. When the receiver first got here, there were not all director staff meetings. You didn't have them. Those are happening on a weekly basis now. These various directors are working with each other, and so communication is flowing. Still areas where that needs to be improved. I think all of us recognize that, but those are some of the basic things that are happening. The next place I want to talk about is the police department. This is a critical area, right? Public safety is one of the core responsibilities of any city. One of the things that's happened in the past couple of weeks, in working with the union, the Fraternal Order of Police, the city was able to implement 12-hour shifts. And what that does is that increases the number of patrol officers on each shift. That was a key concern of everybody involved: residents, the union, the public, elected officials, in making sure that we have enough patrol officers on the street. And what that has done is effectively, by moving to 12-hour shifts, that's effectively doubled the number of patrol officers on duty per shift. That's important for officer safety. That's important for the community safety. From the perspective of the operations, it really looks like, at least based on some of the preliminary data we're getting, that the 12-hour shift is working as it relates to getting more officers on the street. So we're thankful to our police officers for that. We're thankful to all the other people who are making that work. We're thankful to the DA's office, to Delaware County, and specifically to the Delaware County Park Police, who have helped the city reallocate 2 police officers who had been working, I'll refer to this as inside, in the scope and turnkey positions, to be placed on patrol, which has allowed us to increase their patrol strength. A task force has been developed to staff the turnkey positions. Delcom is now handling the scope. And so that's allowed us to get 2 additional police officers per shift on the street, which is critical and fantastic. So we thank all of them, the DA's office for funding it, the Park Police for providing the staff, the union for working with us on that. Another key important point as it relates to the police department is the residency requirement was eliminated. What that has resulted in is increased applications for police positions. The city of Chester is in the process, as we speak, of recruiting new police officers. The physical agility test was conducted last week, I believe on the 11th. There were 17 candidates who passed that. The written civil service test will be provided on August 23rd, so very soon. And we hope to be able to hire officers from that class. And so we're very excited about that. I was told by the police commissioner that a fair number of those 17 candidates are from outside Chester. Again, we love to have Chester applicants, absolutely. But if we're not able to fill the positions, we need good officers. And so the residency requirement elimination really has appeared to help early on. Again, we'll see how it progresses. A couple of other key aspects here in the police department is the city purchased new police patrol vehicles, and also acquired and implemented body cameras. For the fire department, another critical area of public safety, at the beginning of receivership, when Receiver Dowry came in, the fire department was running with about 10 firefighters per shift. It's now currently running at 12 firefighters per shift. That's where it is in the as per the collective bargaining agreement. Since the receiver has been here, the number of personnel has increased to 65 budgeted positions. I believe at the moment, a recent resignation, I think we're at 62 actually filled positions, but we're at 65 budgeted positions. I think that had been, I believe that had been around 58 when the receiver had had first gotten here. So we've been able to increase the size of the fire department. Additionally, the fire is a capital intensive operations, both in terms of the fire stations as well as the equipment. And so we've been able through over the past couple of years to make some capital improvements in the fire stations. In Station 82, the facility has been modernized for female firefighters, so that includes showers and as well as sleeping quarters. The floor was redone. There's a new roof, new HVAC units. For Station 81, the capital planning is in process. We've got two new apparatuses coming, an engine apparatus coming in spring of 2025 and a ladder coming in spring of 2026. Those will both replace pieces of equipment that the fire department has now that I believe are close to or will be close to around 20 years old. So again, seeing investments in the fire department. In the public works and parks and rec, I'm going to kind of put those together. One of the operational updates that again we've been able to, and when I say we, I really want to be clear. I'm speaking of we as the city, the receiver, as everybody here working together. Been able to implement a one piece of bulk trash pickup during the regular trash pickup date. So for residents of Chester, you can place one piece of bulk trash out during your regular trash route. Those of you may remember when we first got here, you had to call the city. There were long lists. It was never clear when the bulk trash would be picked up. There were voicemails were full. It was a mess. And so by moving to this one piece of bulk trash, hopefully we've been able to streamline that process. The problem, of course, right now that we're still dealing with, that the Public Works Department is really dealing with, is they are still collecting a significant amount of illegally dumped trash. And when I say significant, it is significant. We are seeing more tonnage in illegally dumped trash than what the trash collector collects during normally scheduled trash pickup. So what that means is that again, according to the data we have, our Public Works Department is picking up more illegally dumped trash, and it weighs more than the trash that JP Mascaro is picking up just through the regular course of their trash pickup, which is astounding. And in the next couple of slides, I'll show you kind of a couple of pictures. Those of you from Chester, this won't be a surprise to you. Those of you who may not be from Chester or watching, we really want to give you a sense of just how significant this problem is. And I'll get to that in a moment. On the kind of more positive successes, the Public Works and Parks and Rec, we've been able to install new playground equipment in park playgrounds, significant renovations to the city pool, in the process of installing new street signs, replace street lights with more cost-effective and brighter LED lights, and also in the Public Works and the parks, the ability to cut grass at parks and vacant lots despite suboptimal equipment. And again, this is something that I don't think people have a true appreciation for, the amount of work that has to go into grass cutting with the equipment that Chester has. I mean, you're mowing acres and acres of grass at city parks with equipment that is not meant to mow such significant areas. And so that takes a lot of time for the members for the Teamsters to cut that. It also results in a lot of that equipment breaking down pretty often. And so, that's another area that we've got to address going forward. But this is something that I know a lot of us and a lot of residents, and certainly sometimes us as well in the receivers team, sometimes take for granted that the grass is going to get cut. But that's not a given, especially just given the amount of work that's needed, the amount of vacant lots that we have in Chester, the amount of illegally dumped trash that we're seeing in the city. And, these are just photos from really the past couple of days. This is at 6th and Woodrow. You'll see here, this isn't just like like a sofa or a chair or, kind of a random piece out here. This is like an apartment clean out. There's a dresser, there's a mirror, there's chairs, there's 5, 6 just bags of garbage here. You'll see the before and you'll see the after. And this is just dumped on this is dumped on the side of a street. It's just literally just dumped on the side of the street, right? Another area here, this was taken, I believe, yesterday, right? You've got brush over here. You've got what appears to be a table. This looks like some type of construction materials here. Again, like this is the before and this is after. This isn't just like, 5 minutes of work, you get out and you throw a sofa in the back. This takes a front end loader. It takes, a dump truck. It takes a lot of time to have to fix. And since the recent hire of the Public Works Director, Andrew Heyman, who's been here for, I think, about a month, the report that we've gotten back is the Public Works Department has cleaned up at least 24 illegal dumping sites. So, I mean, imagine that, right? So 24 places that look a lot like this. That's a lot. That's on top of all the grass cutting. It's the same group that has to do that kind of work. So, and I'm spending a fair bit of time on this, but those of you, again, those residents of Chester who are watching this, it, you see it. But those of you who may not be from Chester, this is the kind of work that has to get done in in the city, just specifically on an ongoing basis. So a couple of other places we want to highlight. Parking. As you know, the city had been previously under an ill-advised onerous parking contract. That contract has been terminated. The city has selected a new operator, and the enforcement's beginning now with residential zones and pretty soon in downtown. The parking head meters are gone. The Public Works Department took those down. They are safely being stored in the fire department. And right now, new signs have gone up downtown. So there will be enforcement beginning soon. You will need to pay to park downtown. But that's starting soon. There's new signage throughout the city. And then there's going to be a citywide parking study also to begin soon. Capital projects, another really key area that the city was pretty far behind on years ago. The city has engaged the services of a large engineering firm, Colliers, as city engineer, which has increased the capacity for completing capital projects. There's a lot of capital projects that have been in the pipeline, and now that we've got Colliers engaged here, we're able to move forward because of the capacity and the expertise that they bring. A security assessment of City Hall was completed. That included a written report of findings and recommendations for improvement. The city has hired a project manager who is dedicated to the completion of projects, and you really need that spot, right? You really need that position in here to make sure the various projects are on track, and that the various approvals are being gotten, and then the right people who are in the know. So that project manager position is critical. Again, this may seem basic, but it's important. The implementation of weekly meetings to keep track of progress and coordinate projects. Another thing that was done here was completed a condition study of city bridges, roadways, and traffic signals. So we've got a sense of what the quality looks like, and that allows us to also help plan for the future. What is it going to cost in the future? Because we need to think about that. It's not just about balancing the budget today. It's also about thinking forward about what's it going to cost Chester moving forward. As I think I mentioned earlier as well, the conversion of all streetlights within the city to LED. That's both going to save the city money and electricity costs, and the LED lights are also brighter. ARPA, the American Rescue Plan Act, the city received $31.2 million. We are sincerely grateful for that. Money has been used to bring back employees, but additionally, it's also been used for capital projects. And those projects completed, those include the fire station upgrades I talked about earlier. We had to replace the city hall roof. We had to get the ducts cleaned. This also went into a homeowner assistance program, the pool upgrades, the park upgrades, the new vehicles for the police department and public works. and also the acquisition of a new location for a public works facility. That's also important for us to get established. There are also some governance improvements that were made that we think are important as it related to transparency that the councilman talked about at the beginning of the meeting. A couple of things that have happened. Again, some of these things we sort of take for granted, but you know, they're critical to we think resident belief in its government and in the process of receivership. And you know, one of those things again we sort of take for granted, but the installation of a camera system in city council chambers, so that council meetings could be live streamed and recorded. Many of you may remember that didn't exist before. You didn't have live streamed when you know, back in June of 2020. So now we have council meetings that are live streamed and that are recorded. The requirement that council agendas be published ahead of time, that the text of resolutions be included in the packet. Those were things that didn't exist 4 years ago. An updated employee handbook, and we're in the process, I think, as I mentioned in previous MFRACs, of developing a citywide ethics policy, which is required by the plan modification. The receiver, myself, and council members met last week to discuss kind of where we are. You know, there's a lot of agreement, I think, on some of the ethics. There's still some disagreements, but we're continuing with those conversations, and we're in the process of developing that. In terms of economic development, there have been tax incentive programs, residential and commercial tax incentive programs that have been implemented over the past couple of years. We've also implemented a rental property registry and licensing program. Judy Richards is spearheading that effort. In progress. You know, that is something that we're getting off the ground. It's something that most communities have had. We are working with landlords and property owners across the city. Also, you know, working now with the Chester Housing Authority with regard to their properties. And again, that's one that's moving, I think, a little more slowly than many of us have hoped, but hopefully hopefully that'll smooth out and everybody will be on the same page there. We're in the process of having a third party conduct a parcel condition survey throughout the city, you know, to look at vacant lots, to look at how you know, the various buildings and what condition that they are across the city. That'll help with not only public safety but also with planning in planning and zoning. The completion of a city comprehensive plan and other economic development studies have occurred. The prior city policy of kind of looking at condemned properties kind of one at a time has been revised to identifying all unsafe structures and submitting demolition requests to the county for all properties. So that's helping us be a little more efficient there and get some of these properties taken down faster. And we've also restructured the department to bring planning and zoning under the direction of one department head. Again, this is something that helps streamline processes. It allows information to kind of flow a little bit better, and all that leads to improved services. A couple other areas that I want to highlight before I finish is what I'll kind of refer to as the back office operations. That you know, unfortunately, you only kind of really see you know, when there's an issue, and a lot of work is being put into the finance department, the HR department, and the IT department. And these you know, these administrative functions are the backbone of kind of supporting you know, a lot of the other public facing operations that we talked about earlier. And a couple of things that are happening there is one, we've hired experienced leadership in each department, and that's made a significant difference here. On the finance department, the receiver talked about this earlier, is implementing a formal monthly close process to provide timely financial results. And that's sort of fancy financial jargon to say, like, we're looking at what we've spent, you know, what sort of hit our payments, and we're comparing that to what it says in our bank account. and we're reconciling it, which means we're trying to make sure they both match. As the receiver said, for the past 2 months, the finance department has been able to do that, and that's fantastic. That is a significant step in one, understanding the city's financial condition, but also being able to be one of the building blocks moving forward to provide reliable financial projections, which all of us are eager to see. The finance department also identified approximately $400,000 in insurance savings from the auto and workers' comp. We've made some significant investments in your IT system security, improved the city recruitment procedures for job applicants, and hired an individual responsible for procurement via RFPs. Again, some of the basic work that needs to get done is just making sure that we have contracts for the services that the city is receiving, making sure that they're procured properly. And there's a lot of work that has to go into that. We're starting to see RFPs go out on a regular basis. So the final area that I just want to hit on, and then I'll just pause and again allow the committee to ask any questions or comment, is to talk about some of the studies that have been completed or in progress. And before you can make changes, before you want to move forward with improvements, you need to take the time to at least assess what's going on and have a plan for what those improvements are. And that takes time. That takes studies, and that takes oftentimes bringing in third parties who objectively look at your operations and give you advice. And I'm pleased to say just about every aspect of the city in one way or another has either been looked at or is in the process of being looked at. So we've had a couple of economic development studies done, a boost report for the Overtown neighborhood, municipal economic development strategy, the comprehensive plan. There was a Department of Public Safety operations assessment, diversity and inclusion for purchasing and procurement, the capital asset management plan. This was the evaluation of the city's bridges, roads, and traffic signals, the citywide property conditions and vacancy study, a fire operations study, public works department review, police studies, crossing guard operations study to improve safety along school routes, which is in the process of being implemented really as we speak for this coming school year. An RFP for a study of trash routes and to determine the feasibility of a citywide street sweeping program, which Chester desperately needs. And what's going on right now, which is a review of city insurance policies, to make sure that we have the right coverage, to make sure that what we're paying is appropriate. All of these areas, if you sort of get a sense of, is a great deal of city operations. It touches just about every aspect of the city. It's been very helpful, I think, in the short term of making some short-term changes. But from the perspective of the receivers team too, who's working to develop a plan of adjustment that meets the criteria of success that I talked about earlier, these various studies are helping us understand what investments really need to be made in the city and providing us with a good framework from where we go. So that is the presentation that I had today on city operations. I'm happy to take any questions if folks have them, and also happy to just shut up and hear any comments if folks have them as well.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kapoor. As always, a thorough presentation. Are there any questions of the committee?
I don't have any questions, but he says he's taking comments too.
Please,
So
Mr.
I'll
Mayor.
share one. It was sort of like the state of the city with a focus on operations. I really appreciated it. You gave detail that I didn't have the time and I guess wasn't appropriate in the overall state of the city. But as you and I and particularly the people in City Hall know, like operations is the bread and butter of what keeps this going. When I talk about my number one platform item, my number one priority is fixing City Hall. It's about operations. It's about the day-to-day, getting stuff done, putting the right people in place, having money to to accomplish those things. I can't manage what I can't measure. So I'm really happy to see that we're taking account for, you know, the people that we're assigning. I love your reference to the lawnmowers. Like, people just fail to appreciate that we're not cutting grass. Golf courses out here, empty lot cut. You know, it's a little tough with the lawnmowers that we have. Am I bouncing in and out? What's going on here? Am I?
Yeah, a little bit, Mayor. There was a delay on my end. If you wouldn't mind trying to restate that, please.
Well, I'll just close with lawnmowers. Like, a lot of people don't appreciate how tough it is to cut grass. We're not cutting golf courses. We're, you know, when we're asked to cut high weeds and grass, it's really tough, not knowing that there's bottles and rocks and pipes down there. Our guys really put their I won't say their lives at risk, but it's not an easy job to go out there and do the work that's being done. So thank you for recognizing it, and thank you for bringing it to the public's attention. This is a real vital part of what we do day to day that a lot of people don't see, and even less people recognize and appreciate the day-to-day grind that we go through. I also appreciate you recognizing the names of the people that are new, that are in here, learning. Well, first of all, accepting the responsibility to take this job, because not everybody wants to come and work in a bankrupt city, you know, in the condition that we're in. So we appreciate everybody who's, you know, committed to doing the job. It's a great team. We're working together. We're going to get through this together. But I'm just so glad operations took the high road today in terms of educating those who pay attention to MFRAC. It's really critical to, you know, with all the things that are going on, this is what keeps the city moving. So we want people to pay attention to Chester, and this is an area where, when we get better at it in all areas, it will affect the delivery of services that the people deserve. So thank you.
And we thank you, Mayor Roots. This last 8 months now plus, so being able to work with you has been it's been encouraging and a pleasure to work with you. Are there any other comments from committee members?
I have a question. I know we talked about the illegal dumping issue a few years ago in one of the MFRAC meetings. I'm going to guess the answer is no, but have you seen any improvements in that problem since that discussion, or does it seem worse? And I was also wondering if there are hopes that the 12-hour shifts for the police officers and putting more officers on patrol, if that might help mitigate that issue at all.
Yeah, I think more eyes on it certainly will. There have been a number of initiatives over the last couple of years, but to your initial question of, are we seeing a decrease in tonnage? Not really. There was a downturn, a brief downturn when the 1 item per household, when that rolled out for a bulk item for trash. We may have gotten a little too excited thinking that there was a high correlation between the two, but it may have just been the timing. Again, illegal, or should I say, like the trail cams and being able to spot license plates. Again, the ability to prosecute there has been difficult, as the license plate readers aren't the best, and you know, just being able to have the camera at the perfect angle, at the perfect location to catch the perfect crime is next to impossible. So no, there really hasn't been a downturn there. I think the public option that the Delaware County, forgive me if I'm saying this wrong, but Solid Waste Authority, I believe, is targeting 2028 for a public option for residents to be able to just take a regular pickup truck onto a local site and dispose of trash. I think that's encouraging, but some time to come yet. So no, there really hasn't been an improvement in illegal dumping over the years. Increased response from the Public Works Department to clean it up, but not a reduction in the number of violators or violations.
Thank you. I'm sorry to hear that, but thank you.
Any other questions of the committee?
just one final thing as it related to illegal dumping. You know, this is a solvable problem, right? If people stop dumping, right? This isn't like something that's, you know, folks know when they're doing this, it's illegal. Like they know it, right? And in a couple of those places, you know, I will say to the community, if you see it, if you're able to get a photo, if you're able to call, you know, City Hall, the police department, the city takes it seriously. We really do. And like we want to see it end. We want to see the folks who do it get prosecuted. It's unexcusable. I mean, it's just inexcusable, right? This doesn't happen. This doesn't happen in every community, right? It seems to happen in Chester, and it's disrespectful and it's inexcusable. And like we're tired of it, right? And there's enough work to do for our public works department than have to clean up construction materials that are dumped at like, you know, the you know, the end of the street. So I mean, I think that's more of just venting some frustration, but it's, you know, it costs money. It's not just an eyesore, it's not just disrespect. Like the time that our public works department has to spend cleaning that up is time that they can't be installing street signs or fixing potholes or cutting the grass, right? It's just, you know, it doesn't have to be this way. It really doesn't. So thank you, Ms. Diaz, for that question. And you know, we just, you know, implore the public, if you see something going on over there, please let the city know. We'd really appreciate it. So that's all.
Thank you, Mr. Kapoor. And again, thank you for today's presentation. Just before we close, I'll continue to encourage folks to visit the City of Chester's website to review the city's job postings. There are still a number of vacancies. We're always recruiting for police officers, but there are a number of vacancies that are still posted there that we encourage folks to share and or apply themselves. As always, we are available for any one-on-one interaction, small group meetings, etc. Please reach out to Cody Dill or myself for scheduling. And as always, to the committee, we appreciate your time and service. There are no other questions or comments. We are adjourned. Thank you. Oh.